I asked her to coffee, thinking it would be a simple conversation. Instead, she took off her wedding ring, placed it on the table, and started crying. In that moment, I realized I was listening to a story that had been silent for years. What began as one honest question changed both of our lives forever. My name is David. I'm 32 years old, and I live in a quiet suburb not far from the city. I work as a car salesman at a mid-sized dealership. It's not a job people dream about as kids, but it's honest work. I talk to people every day, listen to what they want, what they're missing, and what they're afraid of committing to. Funny enough, selling cars teaches you a lot about human nature. I live alone in a small apartment. Nothing fancy. Clean, practical, quiet. My life is stable, predictable, maybe a little too calm. I haven't been in a serious relationship for a while. Not because I can't be, but because I don't want something half-hearted. I've learned that loneliness inside a relationship is worse than being alone. My days usually look the same. Morning coffee, drive to work, long hours on the floor, polite conversations, negotiations, smiles that sometimes mean nothing. Then I come home, make dinner, watch something mindless, and go to bed. It's a simple life, but it's mine. That's how things were before Breeze. I didn't notice her right away. She started coming by the dealership a few months earlier, always around the same time, usually picking up brochures or asking simple questions. She worked nearby, and later I learned she was a pastry chef at a local bakery. Early mornings, long shifts, always smelling faintly of sugar and coffee. She was 30, quiet, observant. Not loud, not flirty, just present. We started talking in short, harmless conversations. About work, about weather, about how busy mornings can be. Nothing crossed any lines. I noticed the ring on her finger early on and made sure to keep my distance. From her side, her life looked settled. Married. Routine. But over time, I noticed things most people miss. The tired look in her eyes. The way she lingered longer than necessary just to talk. The way she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Breeze's life was very different from what it looked like on the surface. She woke up before sunrise every day, went to the bakery while the city was still quiet, baked for hours, dealt with customers, smiled because it was expected. Then she went home to a place that didn't feel like home anymore. Her marriage had become a routine without warmth. Conversations were short. Trust was damaged long ago. There had been betrayals, excuses, promises that never lasted. She wore her wedding ring out of habit, not belief. It felt safer to pretend than to confront the truth. We didn't talk about any of that. Not at first. One afternoon, after a slower day at work, I found myself waiting for her usual visit. When she walked in, something felt different. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, or maybe it was the way I finally realized how much I looked forward to seeing her. I hesitated. I thought about the ring. I thought about boundaries. But I also thought about honesty. So I asked her if she wanted to grab a coffee sometime. I said it calmly, without pressure, ready to accept no. She paused, just for a moment. Then she nodded. We met the next day at a small cafe not far from the bakery. The kind of place where people talk quietly and no one rushes you out. We sat across from each other, both a little nervous. The conversation started easy. Work stories, long hours, small frustrations. She laughed softly at something I said, and for a moment, she looked lighter. Then my eyes drifted to her hand. I asked about the ring. Gently, carefully. Everything changed. Her smile disappeared. Her eyes filled with tears. She took a deep breath, slid the ring off her finger, and placed it on the table between us. Then she started crying. She told me everything. Years of emotional distance. Infidelity she tried to forgive. Promises that meant nothing. Living with someone who felt like a stranger. She said she felt invisible, unwanted, and exhausted. She said she stayed because leaving felt terrifying. I sat there in shock. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't planned for it. I didn't interrupt her. I didn't judge. I just listened. She said that chapter of her life was over. That she wanted to end it. Not for me, but for herself. We talked for hours. About fear. About starting over. About how heavy pretending can be. When we finally stood up to leave, nothing was decided. But something had shifted. That night, I couldn't sleep. The morning after our coffee, I woke up with the strange feeling that something in my life had quietly shifted. Nothing dramatic had happened on the surface, yet my thoughts kept circling back to Breeze. Her voice, her tears, the way she placed the ring on the table as if it weighed more than her hand could carry anymore. I went to work like usual. Same showroom, same polished cars, same conversations. I smiled, explained features, talked about financing, but my mind was elsewhere. Every time my phone buzzed, I caught myself hoping it was her, then immediately feeling foolish for thinking that way. I kept replaying our conversation in my head. I hadn't asked her to choose anything. I hadn't offered solutions. I had only listened. Still, I felt involved in a way I hadn't expected. Knowing someone's truth changes how you see them. It also changes how you see yourself. By early afternoon, I couldn't shake the worry. Not romantic excitement, not hope, just concern. She had been so vulnerable, so raw. I wondered how she was holding up after opening wounds she had probably kept closed for years. I stared at my phone longer than I should have. I told myself not to call, that it wasn't my place, that she was married, that I should stay out of it. But the image of her crying at the cafe table kept pushing back every reasonable thought. I called. It rang once, twice. Then a man answered. His voice was low, firm, unfamiliar. For a second, I thought I had dialed the wrong number. I asked for Breeze, my voice suddenly tight. There was a pause. Then he asked who was calling. Before I could answer, I heard her in the background, crying. Not quiet tears. Real, broken sobs that made my stomach drop. She said my name, barely audible, followed by words I couldn't fully make out. The man spoke again, colder this time. He told me she didn't want to talk, and ended the call. I stood there frozen, phone still pressed to my ear long after the line went dead. My heart was pounding. I felt like I had crossed an invisible line without realizing how deep the situation truly was. The rest of the day blurred together. I finished my shift on autopilot, nodded through conversations, locked up, and drove home in silence. Every rational thought told me to step back. This wasn't my marriage. This wasn't my fight. And yet, the sound of her crying wouldn't leave me. That night, I barely slept again. By morning, a decision had formed quietly, without drama. I wasn't going there to confront anyone. I wasn't going there to rescue her. I just needed to understand what was happening. I needed to make sure she was okay. I drove to her address, which she had mentioned casually during our coffee. A modest house in a quiet neighborhood. The kind of place that looks peaceful from the outside, hiding everything that happens behind closed doors. I parked down the street and sat in the car for a long minute. I questioned myself one last time. Then I stepped out. When the door opened, her husband stood there. Taller than I expected. Tired eyes. Defensive posture. He looked at me like I was exactly who he assumed I was. Before either of us could speak, Breeze appeared behind him. Her eyes were red, her face pale. When she saw me, her expression changed from shock to relief, then to something close to shame. She spoke first, calmly, despite the tremor in her voice. She told him she had invited me, that I knew the truth, that she was done pretending. The conversation that followed wasn't loud, but it was heavy. Accusations surfaced. Denials followed. Then admissions that came too late to fix anything. He spoke about mistakes, about stress, about things not being that bad. She spoke about years of feeling alone, about betrayal that never healed, about losing herself completely. I didn't interrupt. I didn't take sides out loud. I simply made it clear why I was there. I said I hadn't come to take anyone's wife. I had come because someone I cared about was hurting. That seemed to break something. Later that evening, Breeze packed a small bag. Just essentials. No dramatic scene. No shouting. Just exhaustion and finality. She didn't look back when she walked out the door. She stayed with me that night, on the couch, fully dressed, emotionally drained. We talked until dawn. About fear. About guilt. About how hard it is to leave even when staying hurts more. The following weeks were slow and careful. She started the divorce process. She moved into her own small apartment. We kept our distance at first, meeting only to talk. No promises. No rushing. Trust had to grow naturally. I watched her change little by little. She smiled more. Slept better. Baked again with passion instead of obligation. And somewhere in that quiet rebuilding, something real began to form between us. We didn't name it yet, but we both knew it was there. The weeks after that night felt strangely quiet, yet emotionally heavy. Nothing dramatic happened on the outside, but everything inside both of us was changing. Breeze moved into a small apartment not far from the bakery. It was modest, with bare walls and secondhand furniture, but it was hers. For the first time in years, she had a space where she could breathe without waiting for tension to fill the room. I helped her move a few boxes. Not many. She hadn't taken much with her. We worked mostly in silence, broken by short, practical sentences. There was an unspoken understanding between us that this was not the time for big emotions or promises. She needed stability, not romance. At work, I tried to return to normal. Customers noticed I seemed distracted. I caught myself staring out the window between sales, thinking about her, then reminding myself to slow down. I didn't want to become another mistake in her life. I wanted to be something solid, even if that meant being patient. We met a few times a week, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for long walks where we talked about everything except feelings. She spoke about her childhood, about learning to bake from her grandmother, about how the kitchen used to be the only place she felt safe. I told her about my parents, their quiet marriage, how they taught me that respect mattered more than excitement. The divorce process moved forward slowly. Paperwork, lawyers, meetings she dreaded. There were days when she showed up exhausted, emotionally drained. On those days, I didn't ask questions. I made tea. I listened. Sometimes silence was enough. One evening, after a particularly hard meeting with her lawyer, she broke down again. Not like the cafe. This time it was quieter, deeper. She admitted she was scared she didn't know how to be in a healthy relationship anymore. That maybe she had stayed too long because she didn't trust herself to choose better. I told her something I hadn't said out loud before. That I wasn't perfect. That I had my own fears. That I believed trust wasn't something you promise, but something you prove slowly, through consistency. I said I wasn't going anywhere, but I wasn't rushing either. That seemed to calm her. As weeks turned into months, the distance between us naturally closed. We didn't label anything, but our routines started to overlap. Grocery shopping together. Cooking dinners that ended with flour on the counter and quiet laughter. Mornings where she stopped by my place before work just to sit for a few minutes and drink coffee in silence. The first time she stayed the night, it wasn't planned. She had a nightmare and called me, embarrassed, apologetic. I told her to come over. She slept on my couch again. This time, she slept through the night. Her ex-husband tried to reach out a few times. Messages about regret, about wanting to talk. She showed them to me without hiding anything. Then she blocked the number. Not angrily, calmly, like someone closing a door they had already walked away from. One afternoon, I visited her at the bakery near closing time. She was decorating a cake, focused, peaceful. When she looked up and saw me, she smiled in a way that felt different. Lighter, more present. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just someone helping her heal. I was becoming part of her future. We talked about it that night. Finally, not dramatically, she said she was falling for me, but she was afraid of ruining something good by moving too fast. I told her I felt the same, and that we could set our own pace, not follow anyone else's timeline. From that point on, we were honest about what we were building. A relationship based on safety, not urgency. We learned each other's habits, moods, limits. We disagreed sometimes, but we talked through it. No silent treatments. No guessing games. The divorce was finalized on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. She called me from outside the courthouse, voice steady, almost surprised. It was over. Officially. That night, we didn't celebrate. We cooked dinner, opened a simple bottle of wine, and talked about the future. Not in big dreams, but in small, real plans. Living together someday. Traveling somewhere quiet. Maybe opening a small pastry and coffee corner together. For the first time, those ideas didn't scare her. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to imagine something lasting. Life didn't suddenly become easy after the divorce was finalized. In some ways, it became more honest, and honesty can be uncomfortable. Breeze was officially free, but freedom came with questions she had avoided for years. Who was she now, outside of a broken marriage? What did she really want? And was she strong enough not to repeat the same mistakes? We decided to move in together slowly, not out of necessity, but out of intention. She still had her apartment, but more and more nights ended at my place. Her things began appearing naturally. A sweater on the back of a chair, baking tools in my kitchen drawer, her favorite mug next to mine. Living together showed us sides of each other that dates never do. My habit of waking up early even on days off. Her tendency to overwork when she felt anxious. Small disagreements about trivial things, like how loud music should be in the morning or whose turn it was to cook. None of it was dramatic, but all of it was real. There were moments when fear crept in. Sometimes, out of nowhere, she would pull away emotionally. Not cold, just distant. On those days, I recognized the look in her eyes. It wasn't about me. It was about memories, about old arguments, broken trust, and nights when she had felt trapped. Instead of pushing, I learned to wait. Instead of demanding reassurance, I offered consistency. I showed up when I said I would. I listened without interrupting. I stayed calm when she expected tension. Slowly, she began to relax into something she hadn't felt in years. Safety. One evening, while we were cleaning the kitchen after dinner, she stopped and looked at me differently. Serious. Grounded. She told me she was afraid of how much she trusted me. That trust had once hurt her deeply. She asked me what I would do if things ever got hard between us. I didn't answer quickly. I told her the truth. That I couldn't promise perfection. That I could promise effort, honesty, and respect. That if things got hard, I wouldn't disappear or turn silent. I would stay and talk. She cried quietly then, not from pain, but from relief. A few weeks later, we took a short trip out of town. Nothing expensive, just a quiet place near the water where phones stayed mostly untouched. We walked, talked, and sat in silence watching the evening sky. It was the first time I saw her completely present, not carrying the weight of her past. That night, she told me she was ready to fully let go of her old life. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She said she didn't want to live in fear anymore. She wanted to build something honest, even if it meant being vulnerable again. That was when I knew I wanted to marry her. I didn't rush into a proposal. I wanted it to feel right, not like another big emotional step forced by circumstances. I planned something simple. No crowd, no performance, just us. One quiet evening, after dinner at home, I asked her to sit with me. I told her what she meant to me, how watching her rebuild herself had changed how I saw strength, how being with her made my life fuller, calmer, more real. Then I asked her to marry me. There was no hesitation, no fear in her eyes. She smiled through tears and said yes, not because she was escaping something, but because she was choosing something. We didn't announce it loudly. We told a few close people. We continued living our everyday lives. But everything felt different. Lighter. Clearer. We began planning a small wedding. Nothing extravagant. Just people who mattered. A day that reflected who we were now, not who we used to be. She threw herself into baking again, experimenting with flavors, dreaming of a future where her work was a joy, not an obligation. Sometimes she talked about the past, but without pain. More like a story she had finished telling. On the morning we set the wedding date, she looked at the ring on her finger and smiled. Not with doubt, not with fear, with certainty. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed quietly, without chaos or doubts. That alone told me everything. There were no sudden fears, no emotional swings, no second thoughts whispered late at night. Breeze moved through this time with a calm confidence I hadn't seen in her before. She wasn't running from her past anymore. She had faced it, closed it, and left it behind. We chose a small ceremony. No pressure, no performance. Just close friends, a few family members, and people who had witnessed our story from the beginning. The location was simple, filled with light, nothing that tried to impress. It felt honest, just like the life we had built together. On the morning of the wedding, Breeze was quiet, focused, not nervous, grounded. She stood in the kitchen, finishing the dessert she insisted on making herself. Baking had always been her way of expressing care, and this was her way of marking a new beginning. Before leaving, she stopped and looked around our home. Not the apartment she once escaped to, not the house she had walked out of, but the place we had chosen together. She told me she finally understood what home was supposed to feel like. The ceremony was simple and sincere. No dramatic speeches, just words that mattered. When she walked toward me, there was no fear in her eyes, only trust. When she said yes, her voice didn't shake. Neither did mine. Afterward, there was laughter, quiet conversations, warm embraces. Nothing felt rushed. Nothing felt forced. For the first time, everything felt exactly as it should. We didn't leave on a long honeymoon. Instead, we took a few days off and stayed close, enjoying the calm that followed such an important moment. Life didn't pause for us, but it welcomed us into it. A few months later, we made another decision together. Breeze left the bakery she had worked at for years and opened a small pastry and coffee corner of her own. Nothing big, just a warm space where people could slow down, talk, and feel comfortable. I helped when I could, before and after work. It became a shared dream, built step by step. Our days settled into a rhythm. Morning coffee together. Long workdays. Evenings spent cooking, talking, sometimes sitting in silence. We argued occasionally, like any real couple. But we never stopped listening. We never returned to old patterns. Sometimes, Bree spoke about her past. Not with regret, not with pain, but with clarity. She said she no longer felt defined by what she had endured. She felt defined by what she had chosen afterward. As for me, I realized something important. Love wasn't about dramatic moments or saving someone. It was about showing up every day, being consistent, and choosing honesty even when it was uncomfortable. We built our life slowly, deliberately. No secrets. No fear of silence. No pretending. One evening, as we closed the cafe together, Breeze locked the door, took my hand, and smiled. She said she never imagined her life could feel this steady, this safe. I told her that neither had I. And that was the truth.